If strength coaching or strength training is something that's relatively new to you, then stick around. This is what Zoe and I have in store for you.
So talent is the natural things that you, your natural ways of thinking, feeling and behaving. But you might not value, you might not see it. So it's getting really clear on what that is, how it shows up in terms of what you do professionally or even just what you do personally, so that you can lean into it more, so that you can leverage it more on a daily basis, and just get better at it, so you can translate a talent into a strength, something that you can perform to near perfect performance more of the time. So a strengths-based approach to coaching, to managing, to leading a team, anything like that, is simply about focusing on what you naturally do well. And it's actually quite hard to do. It's, our brains are wired for negativity bias. So it's really easy. In fact, I was running a workshop yesterday on personal development. And one of the questions that I use to segue into this piece is, raise your hand if you spend more time thinking about what you're not good at versus what you're brilliant at. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I used to be that person who would do that, because you walk away from, I don't know, formal things like performance conversations or maybe ad hoc feedback conversations. Yes, you might have heard some things that were good, but the reality is you'll walk away, or the biggest voice in your head will always be the thing of, you could have done this better, or I wasn't very good at that, etc.
The Gallup strength training is something that was relatively new to myself until Zoe approached me. We did one-to-one, and I felt so passionate about that she should be sharing it with this podcast. Not only is it going to help you develop your career into areas that you might not have thought possible, it's also going to allow you to truly name your strengths, which will then help you articulate what you are good at. It was a great privilege to, one, be coached by Zoe, and two, share her knowledge to the wider community. Leaders, individual contributors, there is something for both of you during this episode. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by an expert that has over the last 20 years has enjoyed a vibrant, yet in her own words, squiggly career across various industries, from pharmaceutical and advertising and now into the online retailing space. Now in her third decade of her working life, she has a clarity on her own natural strengths. And through her coaching organisation and full-time work, one of UK's best-known online retailers, she's using her strengths to help others find their own, leading to more satisfaction within teams and more productivity. Having personally gone through a one-to-one coaching session with her around today's topic, which I'm sure we're going to touch upon further in this conversation to really bring these ideas to life, I am personally very excited to unpick her knowledge for you. So when you're ready, grab your favourite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the Senior Talent Development Partner and Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach, Zoë Clayton-White. So thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thanks, Eden. I'm delighted to be on your podcast.
I am, like I said, curious to get into the nitty-gritty of what you do and kind of share what we're going to talk about. But if you are listening and have listened before, we always like to start off with the icebreaker question. Now, obviously being in close to the talent acquisition team, but not directly on the field, you still get the same question, because I'm curious to hear your perspectives, and maybe you've spoken to people, I don't know. So from your side, what do you feel or what do you see is the biggest struggle that talent acquisition teams face today?
So, yeah, like you pointed out, Eden, I'm not in talent acquisition, but work really closely with our team at the Very Group. And I was curious to get a view from them. So I spoke to, had a quick conversation with Sean Allen, our head of, yesterday. And it was really interesting because he spoke about time. So time as a blocker. And I'm not talking about time as a blocker to the transactional side of recruitment. Obviously, it's hugely pacey in terms of a role, which may be an understatement. You might be thinking, but it's more time as a blocker for the added value activities. So things such as giving candidates, going from a good to a superb candidate experience, having time to be able to coach candidates, coach hiring managers through maximising the experience, not only for them, but also for the candidate's perspective. Also time to I suppose continuously learn really and do things like retrospectives, continuously, improve the process. Obviously things like automation, AI, continuous improvement are going to help to create space over time. But that was one of the points he raised. And what was really interesting, and where there are parallels in terms of talent development in the world that I know and I live in, is we hear time as a blocker all the time. In terms of, again, I suppose going back to the transactional side of things, if you think about learning, if you think about growth, if you think about development, it's seen as this, sometimes it could be seen as a luxury item, and nice to have a separate task to do outside of your day job. And actually it's how do we help people to recognize that there's opportunities to learn, to grow and develop in the flow of your work, through everything that you do, and actually through learning might enable you to create space and create more time in the future.
I love that, by the way. So I fully agree. So Sean, hats off to you for bringing that to the forefront. And actually, I recorded a video literally this morning, which I didn't even tell you about, which is kind of focusing on candidate experience. And we as talent acquisition professionals should actively, doesn't matter if they get the job or don't get the job, should be creating that kind of experience. And time bleeds into that very nicely, because if we're just filtering people because we have a ton to get through, you miss out on creating something where they're connected to the company. And even if they don't get the job, it's going to lead to better referrals, better word of mouth for you as a company, which is just a win-win. You know, you get good talent, but your company gets good kind of recognition on the market. But on the flip side, if you treat people, just as a transaction, that's all your business becomes. So I wholeheartedly agree. On that point, actually, it's not coming out yet. So if you're listening to this on day one, you're going to have to wait, I think, 6 more weeks, maybe 7 more weeks. But we've got a conversation with a guy called Jeffrey Lovejoy, who spoke about project work in TA teams. And he basically builds his teams up to 80% capacity. So they've always got 20% free for project work, for learning development, which, again, I think is the ideal situation. But when you're in the nitty gritty of it, it can kind of escape you. But kind of building out with time in mind and building TA teams with that in mind can help create that. So I like that. And it's going to segue quite nicely into what we want to talk about anyway. So the first question, I guess, for you is kind of strengths, right? So I mentioned it in kind of the introduction. You're a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach. For those who have never heard of Gallup Strengths or kind of strength coaching, just explain to me in layman's terms what it is.
So a strengths-based approach to coaching, to managing, to leading a team, anything like that, is simply about focusing on what you naturally do well. And it's actually quite hard to do. It's, our brains are wired for negativity bias. So it's really easy. In fact, I was running a workshop yesterday on personal development. And one of the questions that I use to segue into this piece is, raise your hand if you spend more time thinking about what you're not good at versus what you're brilliant at. Yeah, absolutely. And I used to be that person who would do that, because you walk away from, I don't know, formal things like performance conversations or maybe ad hoc feedback conversations. Yes, you might have heard some things that were good, but the reality is you'll walk away, or the biggest voice in your head will always be the thing of, you could have done this better, or I wasn't very good at that, etc. I think also look, we live in a world, don't we, where comparison is just visible all over the place on social media.
LinkedIn is the worst for it now, I think now. I mean, the amount of companies that I see have had their best quarter over, and I'm sitting there going, I mean, we're in the same market. How have you had your best quarter when there's so much layoff still happening? There's so much, it blows my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So this realised, comparison is a form of despair. It's really easy for us to look at other people and see the value that they bring every day. And you might say, oh, so-and-so, oh, they're so good at presenting. I don't know how they do it. Or so-and-so, they're just really good at executing a plan or getting a group of people together, all working towards a goal. And that is the case because everybody has talent, everybody has strengths. It all looks different, but there will also be people looking at you and looking at you and thinking, oh God, I wish I could do that as well as so and so. So a strengths-based approach, and what the experience, the journey that I've been over the past 2 years is about getting really clear at what you're naturally talented at. So talent is the natural things that you, your natural ways of thinking, feeling and behaving. But you might not value, you might not see it. So it's getting really clear on what that is, how it shows up in terms of what you do professionally or even just what you do personally, so that you can lean into it more, so that you can leverage it more on a daily basis, and just get better at it, so you can translate a talent into a strength, something that you can perform to near perfect performance more of the time.
So then the question for anyone listening is, great, strengths, I want to know them, but why is it actually important to be really aware for myself and for maybe the work I'm providing? And it doesn't matter about talent acquisition. I mean, obviously those that are listening, we're in this field, but this can kind of be related to anybody. So why is it actually important to recognize your own strengths?
I'll start with my version of it, if I may, Eden, and I can talk to almost some like research that supports it. So, in terms of how it's helped me, so if I think, so in the past, and I did something at work this week which talked about my squiggly career that I've had and the things that I've learned over time, and I've always known that I was good with people. I was good at relationship building. Relationship building was always one of those things that I'd always pop on my CV and I would talk to. But what it's given me is absolute clarity in terms of what that actually looks like. What is it specifically within the relationship building theme that I'm naturally very good at? And then tuning in and being able to notice that, notice how it feels, notice how much joy I get from playing in that space, so that I can do more of it. Because when you do more of it, there's more opportunities for you to find your flow. So flow is, the moment where time goes really quickly, almost stands still. It energizes me when I play to my strengths. It's enabled me to feel fulfilled and feel. Anybody that has seen anything that I've posted on LinkedIn, I often talk about I've finally found my career home, and me understanding my strengths is giving me the absolute clarity. It's given me the ability to be able to articulate exactly what it is I want, and then be able to craft my ability to do more of that. Because when you do a strengths profile, and we talked about this a little bit when we spoke earlier on in the week, Eden, it's not about a list of things that's saying, oh, you can't do the things that are at the bottom. What it is it's saying you've got the ability to do it, but it's probably going to take more effort. You're probably not going to enjoy at the time. It'll drain you. It'll feel draining if you spend too much time in that space. So it's more providing you with the ability to point you in the direction of things that really drive you, that energize you, and that feel really good. And it's been transformative from my perspective. It's really supercharged my personal confidence, my performance. But Gallup research, and there's like over 30 million people globally have done Clifton Strengths. So there's a lot of analysis behind this. Gallup research shows that people who tune into their strengths more every day are 6 times more likely to report being more engaged in their work, and 3 times more likely to report a better quality of life. And I'd say that a lot of people would probably want to feel more of that and get more joy out of the stuff that we do, because we spend a lot of time at work.
We do, and sometimes too much, but we do spend.
Well, yes.
I love that, because it's So I think it's that element of, I understand my strengths maybe on a higher level, and the conversation we had was I've never really, I haven't been able to name them properly.
Yeah.
You always just gravitate to, and when you do a SWOT analysis, I think people gravitate towards task-based strengths as opposed to feelings and actual strengths. And being able to clearly name them, as you say, allows you to tune in, you get better work done. But especially in our function with talent acquisition, we have so many tasks. Yes, we should be mostly recruiter, but these days we now do diversity inclusion. We now do project-based work around process management. We do onboarding, we do hiring, training. There's so many different things that they're just nuances between our jobs, that it's no longer just single recruiter. And I actually think it's a good thing that happens. We're moving away from service provider to business partner, and that's where we should be seen as a function, that we are an actual business partner. We speak business language. But then it means these strengths allow me to focus on what inside that world I can actually bring value to. So like obviously yourself, I knew kind of my strengths to some degree. And when we spoke, there was only one that kind of shocked me a little bit. And the rest of them I was pretty happy. I was like, yep, that's me. And we'll get into that in a moment. And Clifton's is one example of kind of the process to find your strengths, but not everybody is going to go through that process. Not everybody is going to want to get coaching around it. So for those listening, what are some practical methods that they can undertake to start analyzing their own strengths? And then we can obviously segue into the Clifton in a bit more detail.
No, it's really important, and there's some really simple ways that you can start to do that. And my first tip would be to start simple, to almost pause, to reflect on simply what you enjoy doing. Like I said before, when you're in flow, sometimes it can be useful to maybe journal things. I've definitely got into journaling as a way to really understand mine. But think about, when I say about simplify it, think about things like, are you the type of person that loves speaking to strangers? You love breaking the ice. You'll quite happily strike up a conversation with someone at the bus stop, in the supermarket, when you're down at the shops, because you just want to give people some warmth or positivity. Is it that actually you find you love just getting into a list of just a bunch of stuff that you just enjoy going through? Actually, you get loads of joy out of making those lists at the weekend and going through those and working really hard. Is it that you're really structured and you enjoy going through that? Is it that you enjoy conversations, you enjoy active listening, really demonstrating your empathy? It can be any of those things. There are so many different ways it can show up. It's about you tuning into what it is that you enjoy doing. Now, if this feels harder for you to get to, then my next course of action would be ask for feedback. Ask your manager, ask your peers, ask family or friends. Just say to them, look, what is it that you think I naturally do really well? Where do I add the most value to this team, or to the work I do? And get a varied response, because then you can look for themes, and then if you have been able to, maybe you'll use that as an input to then start your own reflection work, or vice versa. But use those two pieces of information and then think, right, can I see any clear themes from this? And then once you start to see some themes, then try and tune in and notice those themes more every day. So say somebody says, you're whenever we're onboarding a new client, or we're onboarding a new member of the team or something, you're really great at helping somebody to feel really welcomed, at really understanding how they might be feeling and therefore what they might need, put yourself in their shoes, all things like that. Think, okay, what is it exactly that I'm doing that enables me to do that? Okay, it works in that scenario. What other scenarios might it also work in? And then once you start to tune in and notice it can become hard to then tune out of it. And then it's kind of like what we were saying at the start, really, about creating time and space. It's all about habits. It's creating different positive habits, and it's not only about the actions that you take, but it also helps in terms of how you're thinking about yourself, the conversations that you're having with yourself, and telling yourself more positive things about the value that you're bringing every day, instead of the inner critic perhaps being the loudest voice.
And I think that is a really nice, simple way to kind of start that journey. You use the word journey for yourself the last 2 years. I think it is, because self-reflection and self-discovery, it doesn't happen overnight, and it is a journey that you might feel is a bit forced at the beginning, and then it gets a little bit easier, and then all of a sudden you're loving it and you're like, okay, now I need to learn everything about myself, and then you become version 2.0, reborn, shall we say. But the strengths process is just having that time to look back and go, okay, what do I naturally do well, or what am I naturally good at, as you say, and then bring it into, okay, how does that look at work, how does that look in relationships outside of work, at home, and then tuning in. Because, for example, there are certain things that I am just dreadful at, and I know that. My other half knows that if she's listening. Thanks for listening. So she obviously is better at those things, and that it creates harmony at home. Harmony is one of mine. And then at work, it's the same thing. Now you're saying it how you've just said it about that, taking it outside of Clifton Strengths, and kind of just hearing it at work. There's actually, we at our desk will say, you're really good at this, or you're actually better at this than I am. And then you start kind of, you get a little bit like, yeah, I am good at that. You're all right. I am. Actually, yeah, you are right. I'm really good at that. Do you want me to train you now? But that's how it kind of snowballs. And then you kind of get into the motion of getting a little bit better at everything, but you have one person who's really good at something, and it creates kind of more of this diverse team, TA teams who have these different makeups anyways. So that's the easy self-reflection, do it by yourself version, right? But if you want to get into more detail, you mentioned to me before we recorded the Clifton Strengths one it's been the catalyst, and the catalyst is quite a strong word for it, but it's been the catalyst for you in your journey. So can you explain to me what Clifton Strengths is in a bit more? I know you've already kind of gone into it a bit more already, but explain to me kind of in its entirety, and then why, I guess, was that kind of the catalyst for you in your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, my first exposure to Clifton Strengths, a director at Very introduced it, and my manager had also worked with strengths in the past, and our whole team did it. So talent development and talent acquisition, and we did it. I think it was May 2022. It was the first time we got it, and I got back your top 5 first of all. And you look at it, and the process of doing this, by the way, is it's a, and don't be put off by this, it's 177 questions. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes, and there's purposely a 20-second limit against each question.
I will test this. Just to anyone listening, I have done it. My attention span sometimes isn't that great with tasks like this, I will be honest, but it was pretty straightforward. And the questions are, they're not overly difficult.
No, not at all. And the point of having that timer on there is to force you to go with what's natural, to go with your gut, and obviously it asks, as do lots of evaluators in lots of different ways to give you clarity. And then what spits out at the end, or what I received and what I use with at the Very Group and with my clients is the Clifton Strengths 34 report. So you get a report with 34 talent themes, and they're global talent themes from their research. So all talent fits within those themes, and you get a number from 1 to 34, and then there's a bunch of bespoke information that sits behind that. And I think one of the conversations we had, Eden, was it's not generic. They're not generic descriptions. They're based on the combination of your talent themes. So it really helps to open you up to what do we really mean when we talk about communication, or we talk about positivity, or we talk about achiever, etc. All these different names. Now you get this report. I don't know how you felt, Eden. Do chip in at any point. And I got my report, looked at it, and I read. Started to flick through. I was like, oh yeah, this is interesting. Kind of look through. And then we didn't really do loads more with it, if I'm perfectly honest. And it's like one of those classic things. You get something, you go in a course, build up a bit of self-awareness, and then I always talk about you either pop it into your digital desk, into a folder, or you literally pop it into a drawer, never to be thought about, untouched, again. Now, where I really got the value, and where I really recommend people can really start their strengths journey and really maximise the value out of it, not just being this nice to have piece of paper, is when I started my accreditation. Because through that, not only was I coaching, I was also being coached, and that helped me to really understand what those words meant to me. Not there because again, you get a really detailed view in terms of your report, but you need to put it into your own words. It needs to make sense. It needs to ring true. It needs to really connect, and that's what it did. It connected to me, and I spent that experience almost exploring. The question that I was trying to answer myself was, how do I find more joy in the work that I do? That was the question that I wanted to answer at the end of my experience. And I suddenly got this aha moment through it, and then through lots of reflection and then conversations with my manager. I was like, I bloody love coaching. That is what brings me joy. I love facilitating. I get energized by being with people, by helping people, by helping them to see themselves in a more positive way. That's what drives me. How do I do more of it? And ultimately, that started me on my personal journey of then starting to craft my work, and then ultimately, it's enabled me to start doing some external coaching as well. But it's about finding your own journey, whatever your own goals are. That's the key that it unlocks, and it's a really simple process to go through.
So, I mean, obviously I've done this. So for those listening and thinking 34, that sounds like a lot of different strengths to have. So I've got my 5, because I'm quite happy to share these. And what I'll do is we'll put these up on the screen as well in post, so everyone can.
I'm happy to share mine as well.
Perfect. So the idea behind it is that, yes, there's 34. And obviously we'll expand upon what 5 mean, what the 10 mean, and so on and so forth. But mine comes in as achiever, which is the number 1. So I'm working hard with a lot of stamina, essentially. And I get satisfaction of being busy and productive, which was an absolute no-brainer for me. You need to check my calendar. Again, much to my other half's frustration, lunch does not appear in my calendar. But I don't condone it, by the way. I'm not saying do that, but it works for me. I'm happy for now. Yeah, wait till I've got grey hair at 32, then a different story. Then learner and focus, both of those were very happy. Competition was the one that really it pissed me off. We spoke about this. It really did piss me off,
Mm-hmm.
which again, we'll probably speak about in a moment. And then consistency was the last one. So the reason that I bring up competition, why it frustrated me there, is that you're absolutely right. I got this document back after I did the test, read it, filed it away. And it's only because I knew we had a one-to-one, I think it's 4 days later after I'd done it, 5
Mm-hmm.
days later, that I knew I was revisiting it. But other than that, I probably wouldn't have come back to it because I read the descriptions, thought, cool, they all mean something to me. Part of this one, we'll disregard this one,
Mm-hmm.
see you later. And it was only through the conversation I had with you where I was actually reframing what competition meant for me. And obviously I saw it as a negative, where actually it's not a negative, it can be seen as a strength, because it wasn't I'm competing with other people and I need to see how I'm different. It was actually more me competing with myself. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I have this clear strength, is that I'm always trying to improve and it's only through working out the focus, the learner, the achiever, and the consistent, how they all link into competition as
Yeah, the
well,
combination.
that I could see that. So I do highly agree. Is like the scores are good, but it's when you bring them into your actual day-to-day work. And from there, that's obviously where you can start that snowball effect of finding work that correlates to that. And how do we go and do that? How do we improve these? We'll touch upon in a moment. But I am curious. I know you've put them in your email, in your signature, your top 5. But for those obviously that haven't had the joy of having an email from you, what are your top 5? And I guess, what did you feel yourself after getting them?
So top 5. So my number 1 is woo. And I remember when I first got that, I was like, what the hell is woo? And woo is
Well, if you've
winning.
ever played The Sims, that's I'm just going to leave that
I've
at that.
not, so that goes right over my head, Eden. Sorry.
Fair enough. At least
That
7
might be
the
an
better.
age thing, though.
No, not at all. Sims have been around for years. What are you talking about? But carry on, woo.
So woo. So I think I thought of that because that just reminded me of I'm sure there's a cocktail, isn't there, called a woo? Anyway, I digress. So woo, winning others over. And at first, that almost felt a bit salesy, which is not me. And what I got to grips with that is that's about. I love making. I'm the type of person that may irritate you. I like speaking to strangers. I like breaking the ice. I like making new connections. I want to, add value to all of the connections, whether that's through work or just going down the street, talking to another dog walker, anything like that. And that was really interesting because at the time I was leading on everything from an onboarding perspective. So that really made sense and gave me clarity as to why I enjoyed doing that so much. And actually, whereas some people might be filled with a bit of dread, either meeting in a physical room or a virtual room, a bunch of brand new people and not knowing, that really excites me. I also had on the people. I always remember. I can't remember her name. That's going to really annoy me as well because I'm good at details. I'm supposed to be good at details, but there's a lady that I met on my Gallup certification course, and I purposely decided to wear this specific jumper, and the specific jump on day 1 of doing my course, and it had hello, bonjour, ciao on it, and it's almost like I thought I'm going to, almost I want people to that to be a bit of an icebreaker, and I hadn't realised that was everybody was calling it my woo jumper.
So you wore it with that in mind or without that in mind?
It was only after somebody pointed out that's like your woo jumper, because we would walk around with a lanyard on with all our top 5 on, and we'd start to have conversations and talk about what our strengths were. And it was through that, if someone's like, that's your woo jumper. And I was like, oh, it really is. And I realised that actually I wore it to a lot of my onboarding things. So always I wanted people, the first time they saw me on screen, because this was like during COVID times, they would see that hello, bonjour, and almost it might help them to think of me as absolutely. So I realised actually because at first I thought, I don't know what that means. Actually, that is so me. That is so me. So it made perfect sense. That was my number one. Number two for me is communication. And communication is about finding it really easy to put your thoughts and feelings into words. So those that know me, you might have picked up, Eden, that I can chat. But again, when I thought about the type of work that I was doing, but more of the type of work that I wanted to do, that's important. And the watch for, and we'll probably talk about this later on, is all of the strengths are strengths. So when you talk about competition, they're all strengths. They can all be overextended though and perceived as weaknesses. So they've all got a blind spot. So that's also a watch for me. Number three for me is responsibility. Responsibility is that's a executing thing. That's all about me taking psychological ownership for the things that I say I will do, and there's also it's very values based as well. So stable values such as honesty and loyalty really sit with it as well. So people know me as, if I say I'm going to do something, I will do it, and I will deliver it on time. Positivity is number four. I really enjoy using my positivity strength, and it's about my ability to be able to bring contagious enthusiasm into conversations, into workshops, into the work that I'm doing. Even if things are quite dry, I'll try and bring some lightheartedness and some humour into it. And then number five is individualization. This was probably the one that I not struggled to connect with. I didn't understand what it was exactly, and I had to. So, like I recommended earlier, I asked a lot of people. I gave them the definition of it, which is about your ability to be able to really see the unique qualities of people and really bring that to life. And I wasn't really sure how I was leveraging that. And it was through feedback that I got from other people. It really helped me to understand it. So, for example, whenever I run a strengths team session, yes, of course, I've got an outline of how those sessions run. Obviously, there's a bespoke nature of it because it depends what the individual elements are. But I won't just do the reports, plug that into a strengths grid and do the thing. I will always take the time to speak to the person that's leading on it and get a feel for, right, what value do you think your team understanding their strengths is going to give to you? Are there any particular problems or challenges that you're facing as a team that you're trying to solve or unblock? Are there, even sometimes it's like, are there any conflicts within the team that I need to be aware of? Because I can either do things to try and help alleviate those, or sometimes it might be I'll make sure that any breakout groups are working in a different way. But I want to know that because it will help me to. I'll shift how I design the session. If I, for example, if I'm hearing, oh, we've got some challenges, there's some people that do things this way, there's some people that do things that way. For me, that is almost a siren in my head saying people need to understand where the superpowers are within the team. Because from an individual perspective, it's all about getting really focused, getting really clear on what you're good at. From a team perspective, you want a breadth of strengths across the domains, and you want to be able to align people to, I suppose, work that really enables them to play to their strengths. So my individualization really shows up in things like that. And obviously in coaching conversations, you're individualizing the conversation.
Well, I was going to say that myself. So the very first thing you told me in our coaching session was, how do you want this to play out? It's up to you. I can go through it one by one. We can touch upon it. And that, because in my mind, I had no idea what to expect. And then all of a sudden, I just started talking and felt like I was in therapy for a second. I was just like blurting everything out, and you're just listening, and then you're kind of responding where you need to, because that's the area that clearly I needed to talk about, instead of just saying, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Because I have had sessions before where it's very much rigid, and you come out thinking, that was a waste of time. Like, didn't really I think we get to what we needed to because we have run out of time. So I think I can definitely see that being a key strength. I am curious, right? Because obviously it's great having these 34 strengths. It's great having your 5. It's great going one-to-ones, etc. But the key question is, how can we use these strengths to better our careers, right? And how can we help find work that plays to these strengths? So now that you've understood yours, and I'm not necessarily going to say mine from this part because we only done it last week, but now you've understood your strengths, how did you take that into your career and say, okay, how am I going to go find better work like this? How can I use these strengths to better my opportunities? How can I use these strengths to play to what I want to?
So first of all, making sure your strengths are really visible really helped me. So I have this up all the time. That was what I had when I did my accreditation, and having them visible really helps because and I have this on my whiteboard as well in the office. My strengths are up there so that I can look at the work that I'm doing, and I did this at the time in terms of the work that I was doing. How often was I getting the opportunity to leverage and play to those strengths? And where I felt that there was room for me to do more, that enabled me to then have a really constructive conversation with my manager about how do I stretch and do more of this, and that's what I started doing.
You analyze essentially where you was going. So you didn't make any immediate change, but it was just working out, okay, where did these start playing over a period of time, and then bring it forward to your manager and say, can I do more of that instead of that? And
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I mentioned before, so I was doing a lot in terms of onboarding, and I really recognise a lot of my strengths in that. But me facilitating sessions and doing coaching was much more ad hoc, and it helped me to realise that it was that type of work that really energised me, really drove me, and really aligned to so many of my top 10. So it enabled me to get that clarity. And whenever I was asked questions about what do you want to do more of, or what would you what are your ambitions, or I could never answer that question. And suddenly, through I'll say suddenly, it was over time, definitely for me. Some people might be able to get to this much more quickly. Someone who's hiring futuristic, for example, or hiring strategic might be able to get to these answers a lot quicker. So it doesn't have to take time. From a personal perspective, it took time for me to process and reflect on it. But I had a different language which enabled me to articulate it in a much clearer way, not only for me, but also for my manager, for the people that I worked with, in terms of the type of things that I wanted to do more of and why. It wasn't just, I want to, do this. It was like, because I recognise that these strengths really, really play into it. And then over time, I was able to do more of that. And the more you've got your natural talents, you've got your strengths. That doesn't mean that you stop there and there's no opportunity for you to grow and develop. Every single day over the past 2 years, I have been investing in my strengths, and I recognise that there is more investment for me to be doing. And that's how I will continue to get better. That's how I'll continue to build my confidence. That's how I'll continue to drive my performance. And I think by having been able to articulate this, it's definitely helped my trajectory in terms of how I felt about my career, about how I've been able to craft it and do more of the stuff. In the last at the beginning of the year, I'm now a people manager formally for the first time. Yeah. I've got a team of 4. I didn't realise that I wanted to be a people manager. Oh, I absolutely love it. I love it. It plays to my strengths. I genuinely get a lot of joy out of doing it. It's hard work. It takes up more of my time, but that time feels really well spent from a personal perspective, and in terms of the support I'm giving to the team. And I don't think I would have got to all of those places. Definitely not at the rate that I've done it based on how quickly I've done stuff, work previously in my career. So it just helps you to get clarity in terms of what that looks like for you, so that you can then look at the work that you're doing at the moment and where are the opportunities to do more of it. It might be that you recognize that there are some things that are lower down in your report that are actually a core part of your day to day. How does that make you feel? And actually, if you tune into how it feels when you're having to play in that space, because it's not saying you can't, but does it drain you? Does it take a lot of effort? I mean, if you're spending more time outside of your top 10 than inside of it, you might want to reframe how you use your strengths to do that job. So how do you do it in a different way? Or do perhaps you need to rethink the type of work that you're doing? One point I will make though, Eden, is there's not it's not necessarily there saying, oh, if you want to go in this career, these are the strengths that you need to have. If I take our talent acquisition team, for example, at the Very Group, they all lead with different things, but they're all brilliant recruiters. So you've got ones that lead with developer, restorative, which is about problem solving, achiever, working really hard, analytical, futuristic. They bring different superpowers to their role, and they can all call upon each other almost to be thought partners to support at different parts of it. But that doesn't. There's no like one size fits all in terms of if you want to go into this is the strength. It's almost you feeling it, understanding what it looks like for you. How can you do more of it in the type of work? And if you can't, what other options might you need to explore?
Yeah, I think that's so important to see as well, is that, it's not do A, you get A, do B, you get B. It's we all have different strengths. We all play to the strengths, and taking that back into what we do talent acquisition wise, for us as individuals growing our careers, you can see whether or not you can actually do what you can or what you want to do more of in this job. Because some part of our jobs is very limited. Our competition plays quite nicely into it, achiever plays quite nicely into it, learner does. There's going to be some certain things that simply going to be a lot harder for you to redo your best work inside this field.
Yeah.
So working out, is this really where you need to be, or is it potential stop off? And having honest with yourself. I also think it's a really important thing to be able to recognize in candidates as well, and hiring managers as we're going through the process, like what are your hiring manager's strengths, and relaying that back to candidates. And then understanding, because the candidates are probably not going to go through this, let's be honest, just to do a job, but being able to at least spot through behavioral based questions or open questions what strengths could be working, and then how does that correlate? Because if you've got one person who is polar opposite to somebody else, that might cause friction. And it's just about us being a bit more sensible in who are we hiring, why are we hiring them, and are their strengths able to play to what we have in the makeup of the team, or how would it look? And no, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just being aware, I think. And that kind of comes into a much deeper view of talent acquisition. But then it always comes to the time element, is we're doing skill-based hiring, we're doing this element of strength-based hiring. How can we do that in the short time we have when you've got 10 different stakeholders? And that, I think, is a bigger challenge to answer in this conversation. But I think that's probably really where we can take this to develop our own careers, but also develop our processes internally as well to make better hires. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, I will say thank you so much for joining and for sharing.
Thank you for
yourself
inviting me.
And being honest about it as well, in the sense of kind of what your strengths are. And I will obviously link back to your personal LinkedIn, that anyone who is interested in Gallup strengths and cooking strengths and the Gallup training in general can ask you some questions, and maybe you can help out and point them in the right direction. So I personally do highly recommend it. I've recommended it to our team already, just to get a broader sense of what our makeup is. Thank you so much for sharing yours. And like I said, I'll share mine on the screen. I'll share yours on the screen during the post edit as well. But I appreciate you supporting this.
Oh, thanks so much, Ian.